Eric Latif Ndu, of course, CT Muga. We have David Omoyo, the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya, and we're joined by another guest, JOHN-ALLAN, NAMU investigative journalist and CEO of Africa Uncensored. But before we welcome and introduce JOHN-ALLAN to the conversation, the day's proverb.
Yes.
Hold on.
Good morning.
The proverb of the day is brought to you by Aquafresh Fresh Gel.
The proverb is from?
Namibia. Who was that person who was talking when I was also talking?
I don't know why you're talking with the person who's talking.
Aizuru.
It's a smile. Smile.
If your mouth turns into a knife, it will cut off your lips.
If your
Mouth.
turns into a knife,
It will cut off your lips.
off your lips.
Self-inflicted injury.
Okay. So which part of the mouth is called the mouth?
I think it's the entire surface area that is populated by your teeth, your lips. Yes. And to give it positioning, GPS positioning, if you are a man and you are of a certain age.
I can't believe this. What are we doing?
So we're discussing the geographical area of the mouth. Yes.
We are defining mouth. It's important.
Sure.
Yes.
On this show, we are big on definitions.
Yes. Okay. So start with the teeth, because you don't find your teeth in any other part of the body except a mouth. You don't. There are no teeth on your forehead, for instance.
So the thing that carries your teeth,
Yes.
that's your mouth.
That general geographical area.
And if it has a knife, it cuts.
If it becomes
off.
a knife,
If it becomes a knife, it cuts off.
not Nani Eric, it's not if it becomes a knife. Anyway, Aizuru,
If it does what?
move on.
JOHN-ALLAN Namu, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Welcome again to Kenya's biggest competition.
Asante. Good morning, Du. Good morning, CT.
morning,
Hope
John.
you guys are well.
Well,
morning,
John,
David.
thank you.
As you can see, CT is very well.
Yes.
David Omoyo is the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya. He was with us in the 7 o'clock hour. He stays on for a while for this next conversation. And he's now joined by JOHN-ALLAN Namu, investigative journalist and CEO of Africa Uncensored, the multiple award-winning media outlet. Hey, dude.
What an intro.
You get it from the Media Council of Kenya. So
Your mouth is definitely not a sword.
completely. Indeed. We, like we do every Tuesday morning now, we have been having conversations about information during this election period, especially what we call misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. And we've been talking about, so there's all this information in our media spaces, whether it's social media, whether it's legacy media. I mean, how do you tell what's right, what's wrong? How do you tell what's truth and what's fake? How do you tell what's a genuine mistake and that was designed to mislead you from the get-go? You at Africa Uncensored have also been doing this. You can tell us a bit about that. And then David will also tell us what the Media Council of Kenya is doing.
Okay. So what we've been doing at Africa Uncensored since, fact-checking is a subset of any sort of credible journalism. And so we've been doing it essentially from the start. But with more intention since 2019, we launched a website called Piga Firimbi, which is a fact-checking platform. And we've been essentially fact-checking all sorts of information from mostly our socials, but also from the real world, in a sense, that Kenyans, Africans would be interested in knowing the truth about. So if I'm to categorize broadly, and I'm sure that it's been done before by the people who've come here to talk about fact-checking. So, of course, there's misinformation, which is the larger sort of like this definition of information that whether intentional or unintentional is misleading or false. Then the subset of misinformation, which is disinformation, which is intentionally meant to deceive, mislead, that's where you'll find your fake news, your false news, and all the different narratives. There's malinformation, where there's a lack of information that you can be able to verify. And then there's mid-information, where a person who for instance, I'll give an example. The quote-unquote leaked audio by the deputy president is a good example of misinformation, where he claims that this conversation happened. The other side of the conversation, i.e. the president, has not come out to verify or to debunk that conversation. And then it becomes part of the public narrative, almost as if it is truthful, because one part of that party, seems to have had that conversation. That's a clear way. So if you're trying to define what it is that is fake or false or misleading, the first thing is to check your biases, right? If something aligns as closely as possible to your own personal biases, that's the first red flag. B, check the source of information, of course. So if it doesn't come, for instance, from the Situation Room, you being an example of a place where people would expect credible information to come from, where is it coming from? Has that piece of information been published by other people? Can it be verified elsewhere by at least 3 or 4 sources? And then C, if it's viral with no sources within that report. So a weird example would be an ostrich attacks people in Buruburu, and then there's a picture of an ostrich in an urban looking neighborhood. Then people would tend to believe it and start looking for ostriches, or you understand. So it's trying to be able to verify through other people, through your own understanding of what sites, etc., that you'd consume news from, whether that information is correct or whether it's false or whether it's misleading. So there's a variation of ways, but that's what we've been doing at Piga Firimbi since 2019.
Okay. David, what have you been doing on Media Council of Kenya?
Of course, we started 4 years ago with the Media Observer, and apart from the weekly bulletin that tells the media you missed this or 2 items. Through our media analysts, we have had to do a lot of corrections. Please correct this and this and this. Is the kind Kiambu and all that. We've gotten some time very strange, let's say miscalculations by the media. So mostly we check 2 things. When journalists and editors miss a fact or 2, because we know of speed and all that. And number 2, when the public, in quote, misrepresent media and journalists. They bully them or say wrong things about them, which is what we have been doing. But now what we have done, we launched it last week with UNDP's iVerify.ke. It's a countrywide network of virtual fact checkers. You are in a newsroom, you see some allegation, go check and then find out whether, because we have people already confirming that for you and all that. So like wherever you are, you don't have to be physically available in a place, just go online and check that. I have to note that the importance of that is the rise of deep fakes because of technology. We will see a video edited and it has a logo of this radio station or a TV, and you find it's false. Now we've even seen people overriding audio over video. So you have a video of people saying something, then people are finding a way of overriding. So it looks genuine, but it's a voice that's been imported and all that. So really, we are getting into a point where unless you have the very fine tools, like the reverse checks and all that, you will never, everything looks as genuine as possible. You will see someone addressing the people and the audience responding to someone. Yeah, those are different videos juxtaposed on each other. The audio is dragged and all that. And if you want it to look genuine, you drag into a CNN logo or a KTN logo and it's over there and then circulated. So we are looking at at an extremely advanced level of fake news and misinformation, malinformation and all that. And that's why we thought that the best thing to do is that verifying, because when you post that, we have people who immediately say, no, this audio belongs to this day and all that. So because they have really advanced, the guys, the perpetrators of this malinformation, misinformation and all that stuff are really advanced. We need to give journalists and media workers the tools to be able to counter them. Otherwise, I know Muga will say that when men learned to shoot without missing, then there's a bird that now flies without patching. The guys perpetrating malinformation have really advanced. They can literally take my clip now and collect some words, voices and do that, and they say, this guy is saying this and that.
Right.
It's extremely worrying now. Because again, there are other now methods of circulation. You get that and immediately you pour it on WhatsApp groups and all that, and Facebook and all that. And by the time you wake up in the morning to say, it wasn't me, or this is not the truth, the lie has gone a few times around the globe. It's an extremely advanced level by the perpetrators. That's why we need to move that way.
So taking all that into consideration, John, do you think that journalists have gotten to the point now whereby even you, because a lot of content that we put out sometimes is fueled by information that we get. It's not necessarily you going into the field and picking up the story for yourself at all times. It's content that you may now have gotten from somewhere else and then you curate to fit your story, right? So in as much as we are saying, ask about this information that we're consuming, are we at the point whereby the news creators are asking questions about this content that they get? If you get a video that's been adulterated, for example, how far are you going? Or if you get some piece of information, how far are we going to make sure the authenticity of that content before then it's created into a story?
So that's a difficult situation that we're in as journalists, as people who create and curate content. One, although this is changing, there's a dearth of knowledge of the tools that you can use to be able to actually verify information that comes from the field. And there's plenty of them. Two, there's the whole issue of virality. So Odanga Madung, who's part of the Fumbua network from Odipo Dev, he did some research about how TikTok is being used to spread fake news around this election. And the reason why TikTok is such an alluring platform is because of virality. I can join TikTok today. I don't need to have a following. As long as I do something viral, it's gone. And it can be seen around the world as quickly as you can. So the fact that there's that virality and makes it more difficult to catch up makes it even more difficult for journalists to be able to do so. So one, there's a lack of information. Two, there's that. But I think there's tools now that are available and are fairly simple to be able to use to check on deepfakes. To check on, I'm sure you've seen these WhatsApp messages that chronicle some in-depth conversation between politicians that seem to lean one way. That's created on an app, right? Someone can come and fake your Twitter, your Twitter handle, etc., and create screenshots, etc. But there's tools to be able to do that. And what I challenge journalists today to do is to familiarize themselves with those tools. Even reverse image searches, that you can do on your phone as quickly as possible on Google, on TinEye. There are a number of tools. Then now you can go into more open source investigative techniques to be able to now search through those things. So if you're looking at a video that's being posted that has no context, look at the sun, look at the topography, the things that are in that picture, and be able to do that. So that's a bit more advanced, but it has to start with a journalist familiarizing themselves with the basic tools. When was it posted? The first question is, when was it posted? Who's the original? When was that post created? Who originated it? And what's the context? I think from there, then now you'll be led to plenty of other tools that you'll be able to use.
And the general public, the consumer, you don't want to continually keep doing this. When you receive information, you want to fact check, you want to put it onto iVerify, you want to go into. You're just consuming information as you move. How do we protect ourselves from getting inundated with this fake news and the deep fakes?
Honestly, it's a matter of practice. And the same way before COVID-19 became a big thing, right? People used to take washing hands as a suggestion. So there'd be guys who'd walk into the loo and walk out and they're fine, But the moment that it became something that was of a deep concern to their health, then they started to take things more seriously. The reason why platforms like iVerify, like Africa Check, like Africa Uncensored, Piga Firimbi are important is because they're trying to help people build the habit of fact checking. Unfortunately, there's no shortcut. If you're going to want to be the sort of person who's a purveyor of credible information, you have to learn. The fortunate thing is that it's easier to learn now. But I get it. I get that it's not easy. Like, you've seen something, you've heard something, you're like, the first instinct is you want to share it, right? But it's kind of building in those.
And part of that sharing is you trying to verify.
Yeah. Is this true?
You post
right?
it in a group and
Yeah.
ask, is this true?
But
But you've posted in a group of 256 people.
Exactly. Many of whom don't even care if it's true, you know. So it's a matter of practice and building habit. But I don't think that there's many shortcuts.
Aren't we living in scary times, though, David? If we're saying that somebody can sit down and be fully dedicated, for example, some of these messages that we've seen of conversations having happened between person X and person Y, down to the detail, for the sole purpose of throwing the general public into a tailspin so that they don't focus on an issue at hand. Isn't that destabilizing? And to say that where should we be going with this?
We have always lived in scary times.
Well, come on. That's true, but I mean, here we are that people are sitting and formulating these things for the sole purpose of putting the public in a different direction from where
you
they
didn't
want
let
it
me
to be.
finish.
Okay, please
That
do.
even in the days of newspapers alone, and in the days of Babangida in Nigeria, you were not born yet, probably, and
come
stuff
on.
like that. We have had people who would. I want to give an example of Kenya, for example. We would have machinery who would, like, for example, come here, buy away all the standard print run for that day, and distribute their own version of the paper the whole country. That's how heavily people have invested before in propaganda. So it's just that now it's available on phone,
Right.
but across the world in propaganda times, people have always wanted to influence opinion and try to plan. So we had people who would literally run a parallel print run and circulate it through the same links across the country using all pickups and all that. So what is it to forward a message?
Sure, but it doesn't happen much quicker. It happens much quicker, and at the click of a button, you can see all of this information. And by the time you're trying to even claw back on what has been done, the damage has been done, and that's what we're saying now.
Yes, also, unfortunately, is that I have seen it happen the past 1 week again, unfortunately, where the media is suddenly desperate to chase social media people. Some guy, some blogger posts something, and immediately we see it on your Twitter and all
Right.
that. We need to, I know this is a conversation we've had for years, we need to stop and verify first. I have seen, I think almost literally all the mainstream media has fallen victim in the past 1 or 2 weeks of something you post, then later on you realize, no, that was too soon. So, because the best you can do, as it happens even in the village, you or in other social circles, you say, I have heard this saying, but I need to verify from someone. They say that in the village we have people who suffer from foot and mouth disease, walking from place to place, spreading rumors, isn't it? They always exist. But what you need to do is know that whatever Nani has said, I will need to verify from 1 or 2 people, which is what I do myself. Anybody can post anything. I have psychologically, I won't name certain handles I will go to check that. In the village that exists, anybody can say anything, and people say, no, I heard some people saying, but we need to confirm from that person and all that. So I think, as John here said, we will live with this now. We need to find out how to survive and make sure then protect the sacred space of media, that people know anybody can post, but I need to verify that it is from a genuine handle owned by this media house. So that's why it's more dangerous to our consumers when media, in the chase of clicks or to compete with the bloggers, also falls prey to that. Otherwise, I think we have to survive in that context.
But there's this niggling thought at the back of my mind. Is it that our appetite for some of the more left-leaning and the more red content, has it grown with the time so that even those who create these sensational stories, they themselves have now risen to the occasion to meet that need? So the stories get hairier and hairier, and the ludicrosity of it becomes, I know the word doesn't exist, but yes, but it's becoming more and more. I mean, you look and you wonder, God, are there people who consume this? And yes, indeed, there are people who consume it. And you know this, when you're in a gathering and somebody comments about something which you dismissed, but they're speaking about it as fact, and the person is somebody you realize, but I mean,
You should know better.
Yeah, shouldn't this person question this thing? And so long as it seems to meet a bias that they have, they are willing to accept it as the truth.
Just a second. I know that I think the human brain loves scandal. I know very many people who they go to the newspaper vendor. They buy the mainstream newspapers, but they have a few versions of certain papers which they wouldn't want to be seen reading. So they open and read it within it and cover. So the person you see them carrying just. So I think the brain loves a little scandal and all that, just that we don't want to be seen consuming it in public, and that's why very many people have. A few tabloids will be closed by now, but they know that they are sold within copies of the mainstream papers, and then they are consumed and all that. So sometimes even people want to get into certain groups where you say, no, don't post in that other group. I am known as a good family man there, but in this little circle you can post a little stuff, some propaganda stuff and all that. And if you look at the behavior of the people who buy newspapers in this town and hide them in others and all that, or want to say circulation within a certain circle, and then you're very holy on another more public. So this would be.
David points at a really important thing, and it's more scientific than people tend to think. Over the years, that many thousands of years that the brain developed, which part of the brain developed first? It's the part of the brain that responds to emotion, instinct, etc. And so that's more deep rooted in every human being than even the logical part of your brain is. So anything that is scandalous triggers an emotion. It triggers anger, fear, those kinds of things, right? And once that is triggered, it becomes much more difficult for the logical part of your brain to be able to override that. And anything that is scandalous, anything that is viral, triggers an emotion. Even if it is humor, it triggers something deep inside you. So that's the thing about fake news. That's the thing about misinformation that is very difficult to overcome. It means that we have to resist our own inbuilt sort of mechanism for reacting to situations and reacting to information that we find in our immediate environment, and start to stop, check, and think. It's not how we were built. When you see a lion, you either fight or you run, right? And in that way, information that comes to us that makes us react in an emotional way is actually triggering something that is more, I don't know if the word is primordial, but primal, I think, is a better word in us than we even believe. And so that's why anybody can fall victim to fake news, because at the end of the day, exactly, at the end of the day, we're human. Yeah.
Let's take a break. It's 8:30, Kenya's biggest conversation. In the studio with us this morning, JOHN-ALLAN NAMU. He is an investigative journalist and the CEO of the multi-award-winning Africa Uncensored media outlet. And the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya, David Omoyo, has been with us since 7 o'clock. He's here with us as well. We are talking about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, and JOHN-ALLAN has introduced us to mid-information as well. What is it and how does it affect us?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
24 minutes to 9, Kenya's biggest conversation. It continues. Eric Latif Nduoko, CT Muga, the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya, David Omoyo, has left the studio after sitting with us for 1.5 hours. But JOHN-ALLAN NAMU is still here with us. We're talking about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, mid-information, and the impact that is having, especially right now during these election campaigns. Naomi says, it's cloud chasing that's the main reason some will share unverified information. For clicks, for laughs, to be seen to be the one who knows stuff before other people do. There's that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That partiness that, wants to be the one with the breaking news.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. The thing, and that's why fake news, misinformation is so dangerous, right? Because it plays on, like I said, our deepest instincts and how we are made, but also on these things that now allow for us to be the person who knows in society. And again, the way social media is constructed, there's a certain kind of validation that people get from having a monopoly over the information in a specific, subset of content that, it gives someone some sense of purpose or sense of being. So, I mean, it's like David said, we're going to live with this for a long, long time. We're going to have to try and get used to the fact that these things are always going to trigger us at a very deep level. But over time you develop tools for becoming resilient, right? You become more resilient to these things the more used to them you are. It's just like our elections, right? So 2007, 2017, 2022, if you compare the kind of conversation that we are having, even if it's just a little bit, even like it's a step forward, I feel like in some places we've taken a step forward, and that means that our environment is becoming more resilient to the nature of the politics of our country.
That's true.
And therefore better able to survive it.
People are more sensitive to what information is out there and how it's being shared. Like you saw the reaction when the Sunday Nation put the headline this Sunday, and the reaction on social media, people saying, was it right for you to put out this headline in this particular manner? Are you trying to suggest something? Is it likely to have a serious undesirous impact on the consumer public? And that shows you that there's some level of sensitivity to this. However, like City keeps saying, because of our innate biases, if I am a biased supporter of candidate A, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
If it's hitting the other guy, I'll be sitting back.
Well and good.
Yes.
Yeah. This interestingly, I think about this period in our politics, this particular point in time in our politics, as a time when hardliners get even more hardline on either side. And whatever you say or whatever you do, see, the die has been cast for them, right? And fortunately or unfortunately, they are a big majority of the people who vote. You have your biases, you stand behind them, and no matter what comes out, no matter what kind of logical information would emerge at this point in time, it's going to have a very little impact on the people who've already decided.
Right. But isn't that the thing, that the originators of this information know this exact same thing, that they would have already played on the minds, on the psychology of people, looking at that part of the brain which goes directly to the emotive, that they know, because these fellas are not idiots. They study this thing, they understand it. And that's the point, that they're doing this because they know you will make a decision based on this thing that you've read, seen, heard.
Exactly.
How do you undo that, though? How do you undo that?
Wow. I don't know if you can undo so much as mitigate against. There'll always be that person who will go out and act out on the basis of the information that they've just seen. You've seen, for instance, let me give you a great example that's happened over the past, was it last week when William Ruto's Kenya Kwanza Alliance was releasing its manifesto, as was Roots Party's Professor Wajackoyah, right? And to the point of emotion leading people to make decisions, I've struggled to see even one fact check that compares the price of hyena body parts to the price of marijuana and say that there's actual value that can be you understand? He's been put in this position as he's the jester in this election, right? And he's going to say all manner of ridiculous things. But even the jester has his constituency, and they deserve to know the facts, and there needs to be some sort of critique. So what do you do when a person who is receiving protection from the state as a presidential candidate and going around the country saying all sorts of outlandish things continues to say them unchecked and is speaking to a specific constituency? As the media, you have to mitigate against it rather than tolerating that kind of, you understand? You have to play your part at that level as well. And I think that's where the mitigation comes in. You're never going to be able to stop a person from saying things or from people who hear those things from acting. All you must do is create road speed bumps, in a sense, to ensure that the number of people who get to that point where they make the decision based on fake news or misinformation are far fewer than the ones that might have been there if there was no gatekeeping at all. That's the best we can hope for at this point in time.
And in the spaces within which we play, I mean, it is possible to find out the real information.
Yeah.
And I know that the argument came out and said, well, you know what, the masses of people who may be influenced. Well, look, the people who are getting this information are are on a platform where they have access to these devices, right?
Yes.
They are there anyway. So maybe you don't have a platform as a journalist, you don't have a platform as a broadcaster, whatever, but you do have a way to find the real information. So what are we saying, John? I mean, I know we've said it, we may have said it in a different version or format before, but what are we saying when you receive this information and you're not quite sure, okay, so Hyena could do this or the other thing. What are we saying as you receive that information? What ought to be the first thing that you do?
Check your biases. The very first thing that you do. Check your biases. The more biased the information, especially the more that aligns with your own personal bias, the more important it is that you stop and you're like, okay, fine. This is ridiculous. It's humorous. I love what this person is saying, but is it true? Right? That's the first thing. The second thing is now find the platforms that are actually doing the work of being able to verify. And there's multiples of them now. You know, years ago, when we started in 2019, it was us and it was Africa Check, it was PESA Check. That's it. Now there's iVerify. Most newsrooms have fact-checking departments within or fact-checking desks working within the newsroom.
Yeah.
That's the second port of call. Go there and find that information. We have, 87% internet penetration in the country? So everybody with a phone notionally should be able to do it.
Yes.
But then the third thing I'd say is that if you do not have all of these things at your disposal, there is a person who you know who has information. There's maybe 1, 2, or 3 of them that you know that you can ask, who you know to be more settled, more, that there's usually
Likely
that one
to
person.
know.
Yeah, or likely to know, or likely to tell you. No, just go and check. There's always that one person in your life who will tell you, man, slow down. This is not true. Those are the things that I'd say that you do. But the most dangerous one is the matter of bias. If you are unable to check your bias, then you will fall for fake news day in, day out, all the time. But and that one, it starts with you.
Yeah. Maybe we need to get to a point where then you suffer the consequence.
Of what?
People who've received a call from the committee guy and almost lost their money are now more careful when they get a call. Or if you know somebody who got conned into swim swapping, you've read a story and you've seen this is how it happened. So when you actually hear it, and if you received a call yourself, you're more alert to it. Maybe we need those examples. You need examples of so people can see, okay.
Enforcement is important, but I wouldn't say that this is the way that you deal with an issue like
I'm actually not saying enforcement. I'm saying let people suffer the consequence.
Suffer the consequence.
Yes, you've received some bit of fake
so
news.
you just let a guy be conned. You go ahead and be conned
you receive a bit of fake news, and then if someone comes out and says,
that's
wow.
a really jaded way to look at the world, Eric. I know you're a journalist.
It's
but
direct learning, man.
No. I think education is far more important. Well, there'll always be those examples.
Asiyefunzwa
Always, yes. Asiyefunzwa atafunzwa na ulimwengu. Ndio. But there'll always be those examples that will be out there of the guy who, in spite of all of the advice, will go forward and do what they want to do. Yeah. And they'll be the ones crying their premium tears once everybody has told them, but see, I told you. But for the wider society, what is the responsibility? The responsibility is to make sure that this guy has those kinds of stop signs and red flags as he walks along his way. I'm more of the view that, yes, if all of that information exists, and if the environment that we've created allows for people to fact check, allows for people to find the correct information, and a person goes ahead and does it anyway, then, a fool suffers the consequences of his own making.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Complementarity. You receive SMSs from your bank every day.
Yes.
Do not share your PIN. You receive SMSs from your mobile provider every day. Do not share your PIN. PIN yako, siri yako. Okay? And yet, people fall prey.
Yeah.
Until you hear stories of, okay, so this happened, this and the other happened. Then you start relating the relevance of the information that you've been receiving. Because you've just been receiving this information, Piniako, Siriako, but I'm the one who knows my pin, what are you talking about? You move on until you now hear, and then you start relating. Oh, that is why Safaricom or Airtel or Telcom have been sending me these messages.
Or that you'd have an example within your circle.
Power of
Hopefully
example.
we don't have to learn through, but I guess, the power of an example is really, it's good. Yeah, I just hope that people don't have to learn that way. Sometimes you'd rather not get into the lion's den.
Right.
Actually, almost definitely people have to learn that way.
Always.
Yes, because you see, there is a comfort that people have in numbers. If you have people who seem to think the way you think and believe what you believe, there's this understanding that it is okay. Perhaps the example I want to give is one of impunity. People get into misdeeds and go into theft. And the reason they do is they have examples of people who, in their mind, have stolen even more and nothing has happened. So perhaps when the axe falls, when you see the consequences of your deed, not in someone else's life, but in your own, then you understand and you realize. But so long as it happens to somebody else, it's something that happens to other people.
Not me.
No, not really. Because how else do you explain this wanton behavior where every other day it's from one horror story to another, a more gory horror story of theft and misdeed? Why? Because this understanding that somehow nothing will happen or nothing adverse so long as I can do this and pull this stunt. So until it actually falls on you and you see the consequences, for most people, they will not simply learn from the mistakes of others. They need to learn from their own mistakes.
That's true to an extent. But okay, let me put it this way. My favorite set of books when I was young were Aesop's fables, right? And Aesop's fables are a perfect example of the power of the cautionary tale, right? If we continue to reinforce certain values in the way we educate our children, educate our society, then the people who have to learn through experience of certain things that become, almost universal do's and don'ts is far fewer. But I think, CT, what you're pointing at is actually a much deeper problem than the environment that we are confronted by. And that is a problem of values. When you talk about impunity, it means that there's an absence of something that guards against impunity. Where are the guardrails against corruption? They cannot only be at enforcement, because the people who enforce come from a society. If that society does not have certain guardrails that, sort of shape a person to the point that when they become the police officer or the investigator, they know that what I'm here to do is not just a job, but it is to hold certain wider values that everybody espouses. But ask yourself, are those values part of our society? And I'm not looking to be, I'm not looking for an overly moralistic society, but one that has certain irreducible minimums of values that then, tend to shape who we are as a country, who we are as a people. I don't even want to say country because, Kenyans are all over the place. But who is a Kenyan as a person? What is the Kenyanness in them that would prevent them from putting their hand in the cookie jar should they have the opportunity? And where does that education start? It doesn't start at the front of a jail cell.
No.
It starts inside the crib, right? It starts inside the home. And that's something that we must start to think about and perhaps even talk more and more about, because those are the underpinnings for a society that values fact, that values logic, that values credibility. Those are the underpinnings of that society, not one that's carried by apps and that sort of thing to verify, because you'll verify and you'll do it anyway. Yeah.
I don't think we can run away from the dangers and even the potential dangers of allowing, false, fake, malinformation to run amok, especially at times like this during an election.
Yeah.
But then one thing that you have said severally is, check your biases. And I have a third question this morning saying, so what exactly does that mean? And I mean, we can sit here thinking and saying, check our biases. And the four of us in this room understand what that means. But then maybe people say, what? What are you talking about? What is my bias?
Okay.
And how do I check that?
A bias, and I'll define this as, from what's in my head. A bias is a piece of information that you may come across or hold that confirms something, or rather a bias is something that you believe even in the absence of credible information to the contrary. So there are people who believe that black people are inferior, as an example. There is no precedent or no information that lends any credibility to that. But because they've been raised to believe that and they create stories around that, then that's their bias. There are people who are biased. There are also, positive biases, but I'll give the negative ones as an example. There are people who are biased to think that, women can't do certain jobs or that men can't do certain jobs. And that'll form their worldview. And without there being some sort of check, then that anything that they come across, any information that they come across will always be viewed through that lens. So that's your bias. And when you think about what your biases are, then they're the things that you don't even have to think about that you will do or react or say without anybody having to tell you. That's how I define biases.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you receive a piece of information that when you put up against your bias and that you're likely to just go with it without thinking, that is the point at which you must say, hold on a minute.
Exactly.
What is going on here?
Yeah.
So maybe in your view, as you see it, I mean, having been through 2007, 2008, an election year which went to the dogs, really, and then, cases that we saw thereafter, why is it? And looking at the potential dangers, in as much as we know, then you even as we've said, maybe you need to learn from this experience to then know what to do about it in the future. Can we risk that, having seen what the country has been in previously? Can we risk that at this point where we say, be careful what you swallow, especially when you know it'll affect the decisions that you make?
Well, that's a question. That's a question and a half. Can we risk it? If we are a society that believes in the power and the impact of our democracy, then yes, we must risk it. But we are a society who have learned of the limits of our own, not just the limits of our own politics, but the limits that our politicians, our leaders, ourselves will go past. And we also have to bear that information in mind. What I would not want to say here is that we ought to be so cowed by our past experiences that we will not, speak out boldly about the things that we believe. That's one thing. But when it comes to factual information, I think that's definitely a place where then, yes, there has to be some caution that's exercised. But if you look back at all of these elections, what is it that has caused violence? What is it that has caused death and depopulation, destruction, etc.? There are a number of things. Electoral justice, a lack of electoral justice is one of those things. Now, how do you ensure that your country becomes more just whenever it walks towards an election? We are now, how many days to the election?
34.
34 days to the election, right? How do you make sure that your electoral commission is the one that is going to hold the line for everybody and be the one that can be believed when 3 elections passed, they have performed in such a way as to, contradict their own mandate? How do you do that at that point in time? You must continually call on them to be the best version of themselves, whether you are in government, outside government, because the impact of a badly run election will be felt by everybody. Right. So for me, how you do those things is by pushing the institutions that we have all put faith in to act and to act properly, but also reminding ourselves that as a society, we hold much, much greater power than any one of these institutions. And to start to call on, I guess, our better angels to start to remember that this point in time is one that is sensitive. We need to be more caring and to be more focused on what could happen, not just to me, but to my neighbor, right? If I spread this information, it could be a situation where, like in 2007, people were picking up pamphlets, reading them, and acting on that information. You must be that person for your neighbor. So pay it forward by actually treating the information that you receive with a lot more, with a far more settled mind. That's how I'd look at it. Yeah, but like I said, we are dakika za lala salama, sindio? There's not much that you can do to the IBC, to the politicians. It is now to call on each of us and all of us to act correctly.